Gwen Eiffel takes it from there.
The Senate's last all-nighter happened a decade ago over taxes, not judges. But the battles over judgeships seem more partisan than most, with neither side giving ground. But are these standoffs political or practical? And do they make it more difficult for the Senate to get anything done at all? Here to offer an assessment of these questions are two men who have been in the middle of it all. Former Democratic Senator George Mitchell, who served as Majority Leader from 1989 to 1995, and former Republican Senator Fred Thompson, who served in Congress from 1994 to 2002. Senator Mitchell, is this strategic, tactical, necessary? Is it useful?
I think what's happening tonight and tomorrow is a staged event intended to accommodate concerns of those who feel that the Senate Republican leadership hasn't done enough in behalf of their nominees. Indeed, Republican senators have said just that they want us to do more. We're trying to show we can do more. I don't think it'll have any effect of any kind except to reinforce the previously held views of both sides. I have several suggestions on how to ease the controversy, but I must say, frankly, Gwen, it's very hard to take seriously an event like this, given the history of this controversy. First, it was Republicans who initiated the process of filibustering judicial nominees. Since the current Senate rules were adopted, the first such filibuster was by Republicans, and until this Congress, both parties had used it, Republicans slightly more than Democrats. Secondly, Republicans were very aggressive in the use of the filibuster. I know from personal memory, kind of painful memory, when I was Senate Majority Leader, in the last 2 years of my leadership, Republicans in one Congress filibustered 34 times, judicial nominations, a whole bunch of other bills. Contrast that with the entire 19th century, a period of 100 years, when there were only 16 filibusters in the Senate. So it's become very active on both sides, with Republicans being more aggressive about it. In light of that history, and in light of the fact that President Bush has sent up 172 judicial nominations, and 168 of them have been approved, a 98% approval rate, it's very hard to take this seriously, although I do think it reflects the continuing increase in partisanship in the Senate, which is, I think, the core problem that ought to be addressed, not just judicial nominees, but the full range. And I've got a couple of suggestions on that I'll be glad to get into later.
Okay, well, Senator Thompson, first I want to ask you whether you think this should be taken seriously. Senator Mitchell obviously does not think so.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a little walk through history is always interesting, and you can use statistics in a lot of different ways. The fact of the matter is, when the Democrats had control of the Senate, the rate of approval of President Bush's appointees was slower than anyone since President Carter. And now, while both parties have kind of slow-walked nominees, for example, when presidents were about to end their terms and so forth, that is true, and they pointed fingers at each other. This is an unprecedented ad seriatim denial of Court of Appeals justices an opportunity to get a vote. Keep in mind here, what we're asking for is an opportunity to vote up or down. The Democrats have changed the standard from whether or not a nominee is competent and whether or not they have integrity, which is the traditional standard, to one as to whether or not they can pass a certain litmus test that is very important to small groups that are very important to the Democratic Party right now. And that's what's happening. They claim that these nominees are radical and so forth. People who, like Justice Brown out in California, who received a 76% approval rating of the people of California. Justice Priscilla Owens of Texas, who received a well-qualified rating from the ABA. The only judge who's ever received a unanimous well-qualified rating from the ABA to be denied by the Senate Judiciary Committee. So this is extraordinary. These are extraordinary circumstances, and what's more important here than what's going on tonight or tomorrow night or who shot John 20 years ago is what's happening to the judiciary. I'm afraid we're doing lasting damage to the only institution just about we've got left in this country where people have pretty much universal high regard for.
Senator,
that's what's going to be the upshot of this if we continue down this road.
Senator Mitchell, I'm wondering whether this is about what's happening to the judiciary or whether people watching this all night on C-SPAN are going to think what's happening to the Senate.
Well, of course, all-night sessions haven't occurred in recent years, but they were a regular feature of the past Senate, perhaps before television, so it'll be new to a lot of people. Let me just say in response to Fred's comment, Republicans filibustered 4 appeals court nominees and 2 Supreme Court nominees. So where was the outrage then? Now, of course, he says that's history because now the Republicans haven't employed the filibuster very skillfully and very frequently when they were in the minority. Now they're in the majority, all of a sudden they say, well, let's not do what we did, let's do it a different way now that we're in the majority. I think the real issue is the decline of comity in the Senate, the increase of partisanship, and the loss of institutional loyalty on both sides. And I think the way to deal with this is to try to restore that. Overall, not just on judicial nominations. Secondly, on judicial nominations, I believe the president should be working with senators on both sides on appeals court nominees to try to come up with good nominees who can get broad approval, as occurred in California and Wisconsin and can occur in other places. If you take the position that 168 out of 172 is not good enough, that 98% approval is not good enough, then what's the point of having a Senate advise and consent process if anything less than 100% approval of a president's request is deemed obstruction? I don't agree with that argument.
Senator Thompson, let's try to move past the judgeships. I'll let you respond to that, but I'm also curious about the other issue that Senator Mitchell raised, which is the lack of comity in the Senate. I wonder whether you agree with that and what ought to be done.
Well, what ought to be done is for there to be more comity in the Senate. I mean, someone says you can't keep dogs from chasing cars, and perhaps that's true. But we could do it an awful lot better than what we're doing now. But what's going on now just exacerbates the problem. What is unique here, getting back, I mean, their position apparently is that this is just kind of a standard routine process. It is not. Presidents traditionally have had the prerogative of making these decisions, and then you vote up or down. What is underlying all of this, people should keep in mind, is the fact that each of these 4 nominees, and will be 6 shortly, who are being denied an up and down vote, would be passed with a majority vote in the Senate if they were allowed to have a vote. I served there, served on the Judiciary Committee. I never participated in a filibuster. I helped along many of President Clinton's nominations. The real issue was whether or not to vote for the nominee or against the nominee, and voted for them in most cases. But never was there an issue of whether or not you should block the process. So
yes,
that is unique. That is different. That is what is exacerbating the situation right now. So
Senator Mitchell, you were talking. Excuse me. I'm sorry, Senator Thompson. Senator Mitchell.
No, I just wanted to say in times past, of course, different people have done different things. I know Justice Fortas, I think there was a filibuster. I think questions of integrity. This is the first time there's been a series, one right after another, of federal Court of Appeals nominees who have been denied for philosophical reasons. No questions about integrity, no questions about competence, but because they don't fit certain litmus tests. That is unique, that is dangerous, that will wind up coming out with nominees who have never held a job, who've never made a speech, who've never written an opinion, never served as judge, total ciphers that will not serve the judiciary well. But that's the direction we're going in unless we change our process.